Hello, everyone. Welcome to Chapter 1.1 ACE International History by Olivia's History Archives. Okay, so the essential question for 1.1 is why was imperialism a significant force for the late 19th century in Europe? So, here are the topics of 1.1. So, first, in 1.1a, we talk about the economic and political motives for imperial expansion. 1.1b talks about the emergence of new imperialism. 1.1c talks about the nature and purpose of the scramble for Africa. 1.1d explains the impacts of European imperialism on Africa. And 1.1e reasons for and extent of domestic support for overseas expansion in Britain, France, and Germany. Before we can begin, I would like to provide a background for this topic. So, here are the key terms. Mercantilism, which is an economic policy based on the belief that there was only a limited amount of wealth in the world. The next one is entrepreneurs. These are people who invest their money in business ventures. Deflation. Deflation is the falling prices caused by a drop in demand. Monopoly, which is a market structure characterized by a single seller facing no competition. And nationalism, which is a sense of belonging to a nation and supporting its interests above those of other nations. Okay, so in 1.1a, let's talk about it. So, the first economical motive for imperial expansion is industrialization. The European industry expanded rapidly due to the Industrial Revolution, and goods are mass produced so intensely that countries had to find new sources of raw materials and new markets to sell them in. Development of steam powered machinery, and Britain was the leading nation in this until the second half of the 19th century, when other European nations, along with the USA, started catching up. The second is the Long Depression. Britain and Germany's production outstrips the demand. Businessmen had to lower prices, which in turn lowered wages and caused job losses. The countries are then forced to look overseas for new markets. The third way is growth for raw materials. Raw materials such as raw cotton, copper, rubber, and tin were needed heavily by European countries, so they looked for them in Africa and Asia. Here are the next section of 1.1a, which are the political motives for imperial expansion. The first one is growth of nationalism. Germany and Italy wanted to establish themselves as newly unified nation states. France was to recover from the loss of the Franco-Prussian War, which was and in that the belief that it was France's destiny to be superior to other nations. Britain wanted to stay on top as the leading empire. So, because of this, that is why they were looking overseas for further land because they needed a new source to become proven on top after their devastating loss. Okay, so the second way is through imperialism as a social policy. Political powers were wealthy landowners, businessmen, and entrepreneurs, which gained their power from overseas expansion. With industrialization came a large working class, which demanded social, economic, and political reform. To manage the working class, the government made overseas expansion seem beneficial to everyone. And they argued that imperialism provides their country finance required for social reforms and improve the conditions of the working class by ensuring steady employment. So, governments used imperialism in a way of uniting people through the development of economic and political powers of their country through overseas expansions. Number three is the strategic control of key regions. Originally, nations established ports in other countries as a strategy to facilitate commercial activity and do trade, but it became a political motive for seeking overseas expansions after Britain took over administration in Egypt due to their unstable government. Okay, the emergence of the new imperialism. The period from 1871 to 1941 witnessed the new wave of imperialism that is referred to as new imperialism. Some argue that it was completely different, while others say it's just a continuation. This era had three characteristics. The first being the geographical scope. This is more focused on Africa and Asia. Africa had many valuable resources while Asia offered vital trade links. Number two is maintaining peaceful relations. They made the Treaty of Berlin in 1885 to prevent more warfare. Number three is new imperial countries. Before, imperialism had mainly been carried out in European nations, but then USA gained control over Central and South America, and Japan gained more influence on Asia. Social and technological factors made the new imperialism possible. Before 1817, many people died in Africa due to malaria, which is a deadly disease. But then, a French scientist discovered a treatment which made Africa more accessible to Europeans. The Industrial Revolution led to the introduction of producing things like iron and steel, which was widely used in 1856. Communications also improved, like telegraphs. By 1820, most slave trade was banned by European governments. It, however, still remains common in Africa. In the early 19th century, scientists developed theories regarding classifications of races. This created new ideas on who's more superior. Their, their claim that gaining land overseas was to make the lives better for locals was just for justification for their actions. In reality, it was for self-interest. Britain's main motive was self-interest by enhancing trade and seeing no wrong in this. They said the rights of European nations overruled the rights of Africa. In Germany, a politician called imperialism a great cultural mission, even though in 1899 he said the substance of all colonization is to exploit a foreign population to its utmost degree. 1.1c Nature and purpose of the scramble for Africa. In 1870, Europeans didn't know much about Africa, but as new technology arose, they began to explore Africa a little more. Increased exploration reduced Europeans' fears of Africa, and journalists called the exploration the scramble of Africa. Britain's concern was to protect vital trade routes, and Britain gained power over most territories and got a lot of valuable materials. Many Americans were critical of Britain gaining power, and a cartoon was made as an impression of Britain. France was more active in the northwest of Africa. Military success and disputes led France to take control of what is now Algeria. Belgium had only been independent since 1830, but gained wealth by gaining power of the Congo Basin. Portugal was determined to gain land and claimed Angola and Mozambique. Germany entered the scramble later. A frenzy started and left them in power of Canary. For 1.1d, before we continue, the key term in this chapter is genocide. Genocide is the deliberate and systematic destruction of an ethnic, racial, religious, or national group. So, this is about the impact of European imperialism on Africa. European imperialism greatly changed Africa by building governments, schools, transportation, and farming systems. But these changes mainly benefited the Europeans, not the African people. However, these changes came as a cost as European powers divided Africa, without considering the people living there, ignoring local tribes, leaders, and borders. Many African leaders who resisted European rule were killed or exiled, like Chief Mkwana of the Hibi, who was beheaded for fighting German control in Tanganyika. European countries ruled Africa either through local chiefs or by direct control. But in both cases, Europeans held the power because they believed Africans were inferior, as shown by Stanley's comment comparing Africans to children. European rule weakened traditional African cultures by replacing them with Western ways, and as land was taken, many Africans lost their farms and had to work as low-paid laborers on projects like roads and railways. Europeans took large amounts of Africa's natural resources to grow their own industries, which stopped Africa from developing its own economy and made European businessmen rich. European exploitation was often brutal, like in the Congo, where King Leopold II used forced labor for rubber production, punishing workers with beatings, mutilations, or death if they didn't meet the quotas. European rule in Africa was often violent and cruel with harsh punishments for resistance and actions, like genocide by the Germans against the Herero. Lastly, 1.1e, which is the reasons for and extent of domestic support for overseas expansion in Britain, France, and Germany. Although some people opposed imperialism, many in Britain, France, and Germany strongly supported it, often because of growing national pride in the late 1800s. So, first let's talk about Britain. Britain already had a large empire and people saw it as a symbol of power and pride. British schools used maps and lessons to teach children to be proud of the empire and loyal to their country. Newspapers, often owned by rich imperialists, published dramatic stories that glorified imperialism. Everyday items like tea packets and tins showed images of faraway places and brave soldiers, helping spread support for the empire. Music halls featured songs and performances that celebrated imperialism and portrayed British actions as heroic. The British ignored the harms of imperialism and instead claimed they were ending slavery and civilizing others. Now let's talk about France. In France, the government led support for imperialism, especially after their loss in a war, using it to restore national pride. French schools taught kids to be proud of their country, and imperialism was brought to churches to show as a moral mission to bring Christianity together. Now, let's discuss on Germany. The leaders didn't want colonies because he was scared of conflict. German businesses pushed for imperialism to gain new resources and markets, and the government saw it as a way to build national pride. The German government supported imperialist groups to unite its people. Nationalism in Germany was promoted through newspapers that spread pro-imperialism to the public. In all three countries, the positive side of imperialism were emphasized. Some historians think most Europeans supported it. Some people were strongly against imperialism for moral reasons. A German postcard from the time showed a biased view of African resistance by only telling the European side of the story. Some thought imperialism hurt trade and thought it brought serious expense. Thank you for following along with me for 1.1 A, B, C, D, and E. Tune in for the next video where I cover 1.2. Thank you, and this is Olivia's History Archives.